Hey, what's up my friend, Chris Elim here. This is actually the first video of this year. So I want to take the time to wish you all the best for this coming year, 2023. I hope you're going to get an amazing, productive musical year. Alright, so now let's go and talk about my top 5 rules that made me a better mixer. I've been mixing music for more than 19 years and I still rely on those 5 rules that I'm going to share with you. Now, the first one is to listen to lots of music on your studio monitors and mixing headphones. This is something that I do on a daily basis. It's actually part of my routine. I'm going to take the time, whether it's 15 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, even more sometimes, to just get down in the studio, sit down in front of my studio monitors, and just listen to music. First of all, this is going to help me to know my studio monitors very well. And the more music I listen through those monitors, the better I'll get to know those speakers. And getting to know studio monitors or mixing headphones very well is not something that is going to come overnight. It takes hours of musical listening through those studio monitors or headphones. So that's why I make that part of my daily routine. And the benefits I'm going to get through this are huge. First of all, it's going to get my life way easier when mixing. The better I get to know the studio monitors or mixing headphones that I mix with, the better mixing decisions I'm going to end up making. And it's also a good way as a mixer and music producer to discover new artists, new music, discover different types of sounds or musical trends, and so on. You know, sometimes I'm just going to go down to the studio and just take the time to enjoy music, you know, as a normal listener. And some other times I'm just going to sit down and just to use my music producer's ears and evaluate different styles of music, different kinds of arrangements, different mixing approaches, and so on. So making this part of my daily routine helps me to be a better mixer. My second rule, and you probably heard that one before, is to work with reference tracks when mixing. I built up my reference libraries for years, you know, songs that sounds amazing, that are professionally produced and mixed, that I know inside out, that helps me to get into the ballpark when mixing a song. So I have different styles of mixing references that I work with depending on the song I'm mixing. So if I'm mixing rock music, I'm gonna have 3-4 references that I can rely on to mix a rock song. Same for a pop song or an R&B song, you know, and so on. And working with music references is part of my mixing process. And something I always do that I actually took from Chris Lord-Alge, before I start mixing a song or before I start a mixing session, whether I'm starting to mix a song or that I'm continuing mixing a song that I started before, I'm gonna take 15 minutes of my time before I start listening to the mix to listen to the music references I'm using for this particular mix. And this is going to bring me back into the mixing zone, establishing good reference points before I start mixing or continue mixing the song I'm working on. So if this is something you're not doing on your end, I'm going to encourage you to find yourself some good reference tracks, music that sound amazing, that are professionally produced, recorded, mixed, and mastered. And the main thing is to use those references to make sure you're in the ballpark with your own mix without necessarily copying the exact mix, but to make sure you're just in the same ballpark. This is how I use reference mixes. Now, something I want to add though, if you're mixing using plugins like Sound ID by SonarWorks, I highly recommend to leave them on if you're listening to music through your studio monitors or mixing headphones, or when listening to music references before you start mixing. This is something I always do on my side. You know, I use Sound ID for my studio monitors, and that plugin is always on, whether I'm working in CUBASE or outside CUBASE. So this way I know I'm using my studio monitors the same way I use them when I mix. And same for headphones if you're listening to a Sound ID with your headphones. Now, on my side, it's not all of the headphones I work with that I'm gonna use Sound ID, but sometimes, not all the time, I'm gonna like to use the Waves NX Studio plugin when mixing with my headphones. In that case, I'm gonna take the time to listen to my music references first using that plugin. So this way I'm going to get my ears to get used to this NX plugin when mixing on headphones while listening to my music references before I start mixing. Now, the third rule is to listen to the rough mix, something that is actually very important when you work with a client. When I work with a client, most of the time the client is going to give me a rough mix. And the rough mix is going to help me to know what the client wants, the vision he has for his music. So even if it's not a perfect mix and only a rough mix, I'm going to get a lot out of this rough mix to give my client what he wants. Because the thing is, a lot of people will get used to how a rough mix sounds like. And there's a lot of stuff that they are going to like out of this rough mix. And the idea is to understand what they like and what they're looking for and make it better. And the same applies when I mix a production that I produced and recorded myself. I always think of the mix when I record music. So when I'm in a recording session, I'm gonna pan things around, I'm gonna add some effects sometimes, like adding a delay on a guitar or, like a special effect on an instrument of some sort, and this is usually part of what I want to end up with. And then I'm going to take the time to work on a rough mix that will give me an idea on what I want to end up with when I'm going to get back later mixing the song. So if while recording I added some effects on some tracks, I'm usually going to keep those effects in my mixing session. So I save time and I keep the initial idea that I had while recording and producing the music. So taking the time to listen to the rough mix is going to go a long way to give your client what he wants and to help you out with your own recordings. Now, the next rule that helped me a lot is to work with the tool that I know well when I mix a song. That means plugins or hardware, whatever I work with when I mix a song, I have to make sure that I know those tools very well. Compressors, EQs, reverbs, delays, channel strips, and so on. I always going to work with plugins that I know inside out, and that will increase my mixing workflow. Now, there's always a time to learn about a new plugin, but I'm rarely going to bring that plugin into a mixing session, that I work for a client, for example, before I get to know that plugin very well. Because I want to keep my focus on mixing the music and not learning a tool. That's why I'm going to work with the tools that I know well, so I don't have to think about the technical plugin feature stuff, and I can concentrate and focus on the mix itself. Now, the last rule that helps me to be a better mixer is to work with a mixing template. Now, I made a full training on how to create the perfect mix template. If you want to download it, it's a free training. The link is down below. Now, the way I like to work when it comes to a mix template is, first of all, the routing part of my templates. Now, working with a mixing template saves me a lot of time, especially with the routing side of a mixing session, like the instrument buses, the routing between the tracks and the effects channels, the group channels, and so on. Even the plugins. I'm going to have plugins part of my mix template, which most of them are going to be bypassed, especially on audio tracks. But the only thing I need to do is to activate them, one by one if I need them, but they are already inserted, so that saves me a lot of time. And I usually work with the same plugins when it comes to vocals or drums, So for the most part, my routing, the plugins I work with, whether it's reverbs, delays, and stuff, are going to be the same plugins that I work with all the time. So might as well have them available into my mixing template and activate them if I need them. And that saves me a lot of time. And even better, if I'm working on a project like an EP or an album where the recording was done the same way for all the songs part of that EP or album, in that case, I'm going to use my mix template for the first song, craft that out, and once I'm done, I'm going to create a new mix template for that project only. So I can mix the rest of the songs using the same mix template out of the first song. And that brings the process even faster in this case. So there you go, you have it. Those are my 5 rules that made me a better mixer. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, don't forget to share, to like, and also to subscribe to the channel if you're not already. We are very close to reach 100,000 subscribers on this channel. So if you're not subscribed yet, click that subscribe button below. All right, my friend, take care. See you soon.